Today we are taking a look at a new camera from OM Systems. Now, if you're not familiar with OM Systems, they are what Olympus essentially was at one point, and now it's OM Systems. We looked at the OM-1 earlier in the year, which was the first camera out the gate from OM Systems, and now we've got the OM-5. Now, that OM-1 really blew me away, actually, because I was not expecting to enjoy it nearly as much as I did, and I think that's actually an extremely capable camera for a lot of different things. And while that's aimed at kind of professionals and stuff like that, this is a little bit different. It's a little bit different kettle of fish as a camera itself. And I think that's important to note when it comes to reviewing, right? Because if I was to compare this with the OM-1, I don't think that would be a particularly valuable comparison for anyone, because the OM-1 is a completely different kind of camera, which is awesome. Whereas this is designed, Olympus is saying, to be kind of an adventure camera, right? So you're taking it out with you when you go out on your big hikes, you go out on some kind of adventure, and it's just one part of the bag, the kit that you're taking out. You're not going out with a bag full of lenses and cameras and microphones and whatever else. You're going out with a bag with your lunch, with your water, whatever else you might take on an adventure, t-shirt, change of, I don't know, hoodie. I don't know what you take on adventures. And then this is just one part of it. It's a camera for someone who wants to have a camera with them when they're on those kinds of, expeditions and stuff like that, without focusing entirely on the photography. And that's really interesting, because that provides a different kind of outlook on what this camera should be like and what really it wants to be and what we want to have in it. For example, it's very small and very light, right? I don't need a camera bag to take this out. I can just take it out in any bag, just wrap this in a t-shirt, be absolutely happy. I might just take one lens with me. I've got the 12 to 45 on here right now, which is a kind of great all-rounder, and I'd be more than happy just taking this out as is. Now, that's not to say we're not going to get into spec of it. We're definitely going to get into the spec of it, but that's why I'm out and about, because I want to test this out and I want to review it from the perspective of someone just taking it out as part of their kit. So let's go have a little wander. Oh, I tell you what, this is like a perfect autumnal day in the forest. It is such a beautiful, beautiful day to come out and do this. The perfect kind of weather for a camera like this. Now, let's talk a little bit about the spec. Let's talk a little bit about the image quality, because as much as this isn't about spec, it's still really important, right? And especially, obviously, image quality, super important to any camera, right? That's probably the most important thing. And this does not fail to deliver lovely, lovely results. So you've got a 20 megapixel live MOS sensor in here, which is perfectly fine. It's not gonna kind of set the world on fire, but it's absolutely fine. You've still got, I think, even with 20 megapixels, you can still crop a little bit if you really need to. But for the most part, I think the image quality is really nice coming out of this. The colors look great. But if you really do want a higher resolution image, much like in other cameras that we've seen like this, especially in previous Olympus cameras, obviously there's not so many previous OM system cameras to look at, but we have that high resolution shot mode. Now you can do that handheld or on a tripod. Now handheld, you're looking at 50 megapixels. On a tripod, you're looking at 80 megapixels. And that essentially takes a series of different images, just shifting the sensor slightly and then stitches them together to give you an enormous amount of detail. So that feels like a great option if you do want a higher resolution image, if you're taking a very specific kind of image, or maybe you've just got to the top of that mountain, or you've just found the perfect autumnal scene, and you just want to make sure you get loads of crisp detail. That's great. And I think, the image stabilization in here is absolutely good enough to do that handheld at 50 megapixels. It's not one of those kind of, you can technically do it handheld, but you have to keep it completely still, and it's not going to work. This does work every time, I'd say. The image stabilization in this is great. 6.5 stops or 7.5 stops with compatible lenses. It is, they call it industry leading, and it really does feel very, very good. There's a new image processor in here as well, the TruePic 9, which just helps speed that camera along, and it, again, just I think helps with that image quality. It looks great. ISO handling is fantastic. Lower light capability is good, and especially when you're talking about a Micro Four Thirds sensor like this, you're looking at decent low light quality, so being able to bump that ISO up a little bit if you need to. Now, we saw some absolutely outstanding autofocus and also some great fast shooting on the OM-1, And we've got some really good stuff here as well. Now, admittedly, if I was going to go shoot wildlife properly, I'd take the OM-1, right? But if you're out and about, you're going on this adventure and you find some deer or you find some birds or you find some stuff to shoot there, you can still shoot 30 frames a second with this, which I think is really good. That's really fast, and the autofocus is still very, very good. Now, you've got that face and eye autofocus, which works great, especially if you're, if you're on a hike or an adventure or whatever it is with other people. That's always going to work really well, just to make sure you're getting those nice shots of them as well. But this is absolutely a hybrid system as well, not just photography. So let's go shoot some video on this and see how it performs that way as well. So the OM-5 is definitely a hybrid camera, right? It's able to shoot good video as well as photo. And I think that's an important part of what this camera is trying to be. It means that when you are on top of that mountain or on that beach or wherever it might be, you can get some lovely video footage as well as your photos. Now, with that in mind, it can shoot 4K up to 30 frames a second. So I'm actually shooting on the OM-5 right now in 4K, 25 frames a second, but it'll do up to 30. Full HD up to 120 frames a second, so you can get some nice slow motion shots. You've got OM log 400, and importantly, there's no limit to recording time, which means that you are free to just keep it rolling. Now, if you wanted to use this in a little bit more of a serious environment, you absolutely could. I've got a microphone plugged into the camera right now, which is now sitting on top of the camera as a shotgun mic. And you can get some good kind of head shots, some talking heads, some interviews, stuff like that. You would absolutely be able to use this as a run and gun camera. If you wanted to kind of document going on some hike or really anything at all, you'd be able to get some good quality stuff. Something else which I really like about the actual camera in terms of video is it does have a nice big orange frame that comes around the actual screen when you start recording, which means that you know full well you are definitely recording. Something that just really is quite useful. And of course, the flip out screen means that in a situation like this, I am able to actually see myself in the screen while I'm recording. In terms of autofocus, it is super easy. There's a nice square that's around my face. I can see it in the screen. It tracks me around the screen as I move. And it keeps up really easily, which means this is super easy to actually film. Now, I've noticed that the sun has gone in, so it's a little bit darker, little bit less light to play around with, but the autofocus system doesn't seem to be having any issues with that, even with my cap. There we go, I'll raise my cap up a little bit so you can see my eyes, because it is a bit darker now. Sun's coming out, I think, in a minute, but it is interesting to see that autofocus system work really well, even with kind of a darker environment. One thing that is very slightly frustrating about using a microphone with the camera is it does plug in exactly where the screen flips out so I can see myself. So while it's not the most annoying thing in the world, it's just maybe not the most thoughtful placement of that microphone jack with the screen. So for content creators, if you wanted to vlog while you were out and about and you had a shotgun mic, it does mean it obstructs part of the screen. That being said, I can still see myself, I can see I'm recording, I can see my settings, and I can see that the autofocus is working absolutely perfectly. In fact, talking about the autofocus for a second, I've not had a single issue with that the whole time I've been using this camera, whether it be photo or video. Now, admittedly, I've mostly been shooting here in this kind of forest with autumn stuff going on, and I'm gonna go and shoot some stuff in the hills later with sunset as well, but autofocus has been working really, really well with this camera. It's one of those things that the best compliment I can give it is the fact that I've just not had to think about it at all. The camera has other features that you might expect with that Olympus heritage. So you've got live composite, live ND, and live bulb modes, which are all great ways of being able to see your long exposure or your night sky photo as you're taking it, rather than waiting until it's done to see the results. Now, speaking of night sky, we also see the return of the starry sky AF, which makes this a lot easier to get nice, sharp night sky images. And of course, focus stacking makes a return as well. Now, like I said earlier in the video, the design of the camera is nice and small. It's lightweight and it pairs perfectly with the f4 lenses that I was using with it, since they kept the whole system nice and small and nice and light. Now, it's really comfortable to hold and it's easy enough to just carry around in your hand, but it certainly slips into any bag with other kit as well. Now, in terms of connections, obviously I mentioned the microphone input earlier on. We've also got a micro HDMI port and USB as well. Now, my only real gripe with this is, apart from the placement of the mic with the flip out screen, which we mentioned earlier, is that it's not USB-C, it's micro USB, which is fine, but I've really gotten used to USB-C everywhere, so it would have been nice to see that here. Otherwise, the screen is great. I love the vari-angle monitor. It's extremely easy to use as a touchscreen as well, and it's nice and bright, and the EVF looks really nice as well. It definitely fits the bill as a great camera to take out with you on adventures, on hikes, just generally out and about, without feeling the need for an entire bag full of lenses and a tripod and loads of photographic kit and all that kind of stuff. It is absolutely ideal for people who want to take photos, but photography isn't the main or only reason to go out and do these things. You can check out the camera for yourself by following the link in the description. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe as well. I will, of course, see you in the next video. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.